All. It is the 10 o'clock hour. Today is Tuesday, October 23rd, 2018. The Board of Supervisors of the County of Del Norte and the governing body of all their special assessment and taxing districts for which said board so acts is now meeting in regular session. Only those items that indicate a specific time will be heard at the assigned time. All other items may be taken out of sequence to accommodate the public and staff availability. At this time, I'd like for you to take a moment of reflection. Okay, thank you. Roger, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Introduction of new employees. Do we have any? Okay, seeing none. County Council, any actions from closed session?
No reportable action.
Thank you. This time I would request any deletions, corrections, or additions from board members to the agenda. In order to add an item to the agenda, the matter must have come to the attention of the county subsequent to the posting of the agenda, and the matter requires action before the next regular meeting. Is there any such deletions or corrections? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Any public comment on the agenda, on consent agenda items only? I would entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Kylie, would you please poll the vote?
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor Berkowitz?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hemmingson?
Yes. And within that consent agenda is a proclamation proclaiming gratitude and honoring all veterans on Veterans Day, November 11th, 2018. Whereas November 11th is nationally celebrated as Veterans Day, and whereas millions of veterans throughout the United States have fought for our country, and many of those lost their lives so that we might enjoy freedoms that we have today. And whereas millions of veterans have suffered horrific physical wounds and disabilities, including mental and emotional issues, affecting a lifelong hardship on them and their families. Whereas veterans deserve the respect and honor that this day only begins to give throughout the year, and whereas the Board of Supervisors would like to acknowledge and honor all veterans for their part in our fight for freedom. Now, therefore, the Del Norte County Board of Supervisors proclaims its gratitude to those who have led, those who have served in the armed forces on behalf of the United States of America during both peacetime and wartime. Be it further proclaimed that the Del Norte County Board of Supervisors hereby encourages members of the community to participate in the Veterans Day activities as sponsored by local agencies and veterans organizations. Passed and adopted this 23rd day of October 2018. It's up to you. Okay. He chooses not to speak, which is okay. Miscellaneous, we're going to move on to legislative and budget issues. Jay, you got anything?
Nothing additional at this point in regards to the legislation, no letters. As far as the budget's concerned, no additional reports today.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, public comment. We're going to move to public comment period. Members of the public may address the board on matters which are within the jurisdiction of the board. If you are addressing the board on regarding a matter listed on the agenda, you may be asked to hold your comments until the board takes up that matter. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Yes, please.
Thank you. Members of the board, my name is Sheila Davis, and I've worked for the county for 11 years. I'm currently a social worker supervisor up for the emergency response unit in child welfare. We work to protect kids. We investigate suspected reports of neglect and abuse of our children. I'm here today to tell you that our county is in crisis. County employees are barely hanging on. They're barely making it. Every week we lose valuable employees because they can't afford to pay their bills or make it here. Employees are forced to take on second jobs because they can't pay their bills. They have their children on Medi-Cal because they aren't making enough wages. I understand that the county budget is tight, but the county's not taking advantage of all the money that's available from state and federal sources. Many salaries for positions in this county are 15 to 20% below what other rural Northern California counties pay. To remain competitive and to keep and attract the best candidates, we need to pay salaries that are comparable to other similar counties. Social workers are paid 23% below. District attorney investigators are paid 25% less. Planners are 22% below. Road maintenance workers are more than 15% below. We understand the county cannot make up this gap all at once, but you need to show the employees that you recognize the issue and are making attempts. This isn't as hard as you think. The majority of county staff is paid from funds from state and federal government, and the county could make sure that they are receiving its share of these funds by keeping staff salaries at market rate. Other counties do this. Let's make sure that Del Norte is getting its share from Sacramento and Washington, D.C. Finally, I would like to remind the board that not effectively addressing the wage disparity in the county will end up costing the county more. The cost of turnover, constant recruitment, and retaining is high. It would be better to put that money toward fixing those disparities. The work that the people I supervise here in the county, what they do is vital. These kids need us, and we need your help to do the job.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Good morning, supervisors. My name is Sandra Jarabek, and I live in Supervisor Jerry Hemingson's district. Good morning.
Good morning.
So I'm here to thank you, Supervisor Hemingson. You're surprised, right?
I am.
I'm here to thank you and Heidi Kunstl and Dominic Mello and Helen Ferguson for the cleanup at the Pacific Shore subdivision.
You're welcome.
I want to thank Helen especially for her passion and drive in orchestrating the cleanup. We all know that things are not done out there yet, that a lot more needs to happen, and that dumping is still happening. However, I had the opportunity to drive around many of the back roads in the subdivision in August, and I was stunned to see that it looks better than it has in 25 years, which is the extent of my history with that. So, I want to make you aware that this is a partnership, and many of us work in the subdivision to improve things. I personally have removed a lot of Scotch broom in threatened Oregon silver spot butterfly habitat and picked up some trash. There is a state parks employee named Elmer that you might not be aware of. He works in maintenance, and he has been told to go out there every week and pick up trash. And he is doing it, and he is finding it, and he is part of the partnership. State Parks is part of this too, so I wanted you to know that. I don't know if you realize that at the September Coastal Commission meeting in Fort Bragg, Joshua Levine, the enforcement officer for the Coastal Commission, was positively bragging on what has happened there and showing slides of before and after the cleanup, and there was great interest from the board. So I thought you should know, Supervisor Hemmingson, that people are bragging on you to the Coastal Commission and Helen, and I thought you might find that refreshing. Thank you.
I do. Thank you. Yeah. And just a comment on that. Yeah, Helen Ferguson was, I agree, she was certainly the person who ramrodded all that and did an excellent job. Really happy for the small part that I played in it that we got such results. So anyway, very happy to hear that. Thank you. Any other public comment?
Good morning, Catherine Murray. I'm a resident of the city at Corson in the county. I'm here to talk about Measure C, but I wanted to applaud Sheriff Apperson for his idea of taking inmates out and to work in the community. I think it helps them find a little bit of dignity and respect for themselves by contributing to the community. So I applaud him and the inmates for keeping their word. I do agree with Ms. Davis. I had been a social worker for the county, and it's a very, very challenging job, and the burnout rate is very high, especially when you have to worry about fiscal matters at home. And congratulations on the Pacific Shores cleanup. That was a nightmare. Anyway, so Measure C, I'm here to, I'm a supporter of it. I believe that it's a viable way out for the harbor. And I think it's the best solution that we have at our hands. There was a small-time celebrity named Mr. T who used to say, "Pity the fool." And today in the Coastal Voices, I read where someone considered tsunamis man-made disasters. So pity the fool that believes something like that. I mean, this was not a man-made disaster when we had to do a matching fund for the $50 million that we got to repair the harbor. And there's still a lot of work done there. If we want to keep people in this community and keep jobs, then that's the way to do it. I don't know if any of you ever call up when you're traveling and say, how much is your TOT? And then they tell you and they say, well, I'm not going to go there. So think about it really. I mean, this is the most viable solution. So please vote yes on Measure C. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing no other public comment, we're going to move on to our 10:10 timed item, which is our cannabis update. Jesse? Good morning.
Morning, Jesse Davis. I see Joel's not here, so we'll cover. We had a couple of meetings since we were here last to report, talking mostly about commercial cannabis cultivation on timberlands. And we also talked about commercial nurseries, wherever they might fit, and we talked a little bit about hemp and how that might fit in the county and with cannabis. So as far as timberland, a lot of the discussion centered around general plan consistency and about productive economic uses. The fact that productive economic uses of timberland is relatively restricted with the way the general plan is now. We talked about scale of operation for these farms, water sources, road access, primarily county-maintained roads, whether they're paved or dirt. Setbacks from national forest land, state parks, residential zones, setbacks from neighboring properties of like zoning, and additionally setbacks from neighbors with use permits for residential uses within timberland. TPZ lands would need to be rezoned to something that's taxable, so we wouldn't be using tax-deferred lands for cultivation. And then most of the balance of the timberland is PO zoning, which is kind of a weird zoning that's public ownership, and there's a bunch of private parcels in that. But there's input from community development that those properties would need to be rezoned into something like agricultural forestry. The PO zoning doesn't really fit cleanly into the general plan. There's some things that need to be cleaned up there. So I did go back and review it, and we had some discussion about the general plan in general and whether or not it can be interpreted to accept agricultural type uses in timberland, or if it does indeed need to be amended in some way. And so that's a big question, of course, because that could take a lot of time. And yeah, so there's definitely some things that have been not paid attention to over the many years with timberland. There's not a lot of expressly permitted uses in timberland for economic development besides harvesting timber. So that, it's hard to say how long that conversation will go, and whether or not we'll be able to get back into details of timberland cultivation until that question is sort of resolved. So we're going to wait 2 weeks for our next meeting. November 5th will be our next meeting, and that'll give some time for county council and community development to sort of ponder that general plan question. As far as nurseries, they seem suitable in ag lands. They could be in greenhouses and out of sight. The odors from these operations could be mitigated through the design of the structures. And the working group thinks that the nurseries could be a good job creating export business. So these are operations that just produce vegetating plants, not cannabis flower production. And it's a big export business around the state. And then we talked a bit about hemp. The California hemp program is advancing nicely, finally, and the ag department will be responsible for administration of policy with hemp regulations. The board, I think, is involved in terms of fee schedules and things like that, but it's mostly the responsibility of the ag department through the state. And so there are some setbacks from other cannabis plants that's required with hemp, depending on what you're doing with that hemp. If you're producing seed, what type of seeds you're producing, those kinds of things. So those will be some good ongoing discussions to have now that there's some movement at the state level with the hemp program that had been stalled for some time while they're working on the cannabis program. But I'm personally excited about that, and I think it actually has, over the long haul, probably has more potential for our county for economic benefit compared to cannabis. So that pretty much wraps it up. Take any questions if you have. And our next meeting is on the 5th, November 5th.
Thanks, Jesse. Hang around for a little bit. I'm going to ask for public comment, and then we're going to see if the board members have any questions or comments.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Any public comment on this update?
Good morning. I'm Chuck Orton. Thanks about the veterans. I just dropped it down the hall when I was 21. And real quick with the Pacific Shores, Esther Cordy was in town about 6 weeks ago, and I grew up there since I was a baby, you know, and she wanted to make sure I said thank you. So thanks. This last week I was over in Grants Pass with my nephew that lives there, and we went to two different places that grow. They've sold 1,000 plants last year at $50 a piece, 18 feet by 18 feet. 102.7 on the radio, if anybody wants to grow. They got 8 sites at our RV park over there. And I always thought, you know, even though we've had that shop for 60 years, I went and bought 2 school buses a couple of years ago. I still own one of them. So I always thought, you know, you could move around if you know, the property wasn't working out, but now that plants are 18 feet in the air, it might look a little ridiculous, but thank you folks for doing what you do.
All right, thanks, Chuck. Any other public comment on the cannabis update?
Catherine Murray again. I am in support of Measure B for the cannabis and the ordinances that we need in order to make this happen. When you, Mr. Gitlin, oppose it, you're costing the county a lot of money. There are many states that will have the measure to legalize cannabis on their ballots for November 6th. So the momentum is there, and eventually the feds are going to change their status on cannabis. So let's get going. Let's support our cannabis group and make this happen so that we can bring in more money to the county. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on the cannabis update? Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from board members? Sure.
Jesse Davis, just like to take a chance to plug Measure B, vote for the cannabis business tax. The potential cannabis business community here supports it. It's a fair tax, it's low, it won't discourage cannabis business, and I think it could be good for the county. So please vote yes, Measure B. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, we're moving right along. We're going to go to committee and activity reports. Bob, will you start us off?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last week I participated in the NACO conference call with the Public Lands Committee. Conclusion is that PILT is up in the air for full funding, but we expect that it will come in at $480 to $490 million, which is close to full funding. With respect to SRS legislation, Senators Wyden and Crapo are working on a bill that would create an endowment that would take into account the 25% forest and add the local long-term solution. Wyden's office predicts that they should have an actual bill by actually next week. I attended a special meeting with the Chamber of Commerce with Senator McGuire, where we talked about the new legislation that will help with the homeless problem. Delaware County would receive $500,000 to provide a place for homeless, along with $75,000 for technical assistance grants. This is in addition to the $417,000 we already have to deal with the mentally challenged homeless. Senators Hemmingson, Gitlin, and I attended a forum on homelessness held at St. Joseph's Church. Actually, it wasn't, it was the Episcopal Church. Several of the participants told us stories on what it was actually like to be homeless. Supervisor Gitlin and I attended the revolving loan fund committee, where we discussed the situation on 2 properties that we're dealing with. I had a meeting with Craig McDonald, the CFO of Center Coast Hospital, where we discussed how to deal with the homeless being discharged from emergency care at the hospital. In view of the new funds we will be receiving from the state to deal with the homeless problem, we need to incorporate this into a plan on how we'll be dealing with the homeless problem. Last week I attended the North Coast Resource Partnership. This was a meeting in Weaverville, and I'll have an update for you at the next meeting. Mr. Chairman, at the last meeting I made the following request. Here it is. In view of the fact that Greg Burns, our Washington, D.C. lobbyist, has suggested that our board, consisting of 5 supervisors, come back to Washington as much as possible to present our case to Congress and the administration. And due to the fact that all of us have been back there, except for one supervisor, that being Supervisor Gitlin, and considering that Supervisor Gitlin, the second longest tenure Board of Supervisors member, therefore I request that the next agenda include an item that we send Supervisor Gitlin along with a supervisor of his choosing back to Washington, D.C. to present our case to the administration and Congress. That request failed to get on this meeting's agenda as it was requested. So therefore, Mr. Chairman, I move that this item be placed on the next agenda for that meeting. And I'm making that into a motion.
I'll second that.
Is that proper procedure, counsel?
And so the Brown Act allows for the board to take action to direct staff to place a matter of business on the future agenda, and our admin policy supports that procedurally, so that's a legal action.
Okay. Any public comment?
So Catherine Murray again, just to be clear, it's not a motion that would be allowed during this time. I believe that your counsel indicated that it should be a directive. So your motion is out of order, Mr. Berkowitz and Mr. Gitlin. You would need to have it on the next agenda. You can direct it to be on the next agenda as an agendized item, but you can't vote on it right now. Thank you.
Is that something that you agree with, counsel?
So the Brown Act says no action or direct discussion shall be undertaken on any item not appearing on the posted agenda, except that members of the legislative body or its staff may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed by persons exercising their public testimony rights, has the citation. In addition, on their own initiative or in response to questions posed by the public, a member of the legislative body or its staff may ask a question for clarification, make a brief statement, or make a brief report on his or her own activity. Furthermore, a member of the legislative body or the body itself, subject to rules or procedures of the legislative body, may provide a reference to staff or other resources for factual information, request staff to report back to the body at a subsequent meeting concerning any matter, or take action to direct staff to place a matter of business on a future agenda.
Perfect.
So I
so
believe
it is appropriate.
it would be appropriate.
Yeah. That would have been the short answer.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Just in case anyone wants to hear the whole section.
Okay, more public comment?
Robert Dorigo, the county. I would just prefer, any future lobbying that I would see the county actually traveling and spending money on this to be done in conjunction with the two counties north of us and the two counties south of us, all at the same time. So we really need to plan the trip together to make a bigger team. There's other stakeholders besides Del Norte, and so the effort really needs to be more concentrated. Otherwise, we're just spending our own money to make a very small effort. So I'm all for it when we get a bigger effort from our neighboring counties. I'd like to see the trip. I'd like to see a dozen people from 3 or 4 or 5 counties on board with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Hi, good morning. My name's Donna Rushing. About agenda items, it sounds like you guys are not clear on how to add agenda items.
Yes, we are at this point.
I'm sorry, thank you.
It's okay.
In my view right now, and seeing a couple, there's been a few times that Mr. Berkowitz has asked for items to be on the agenda, and then it does not get on the agenda. So if you guys could please clarify if he's not doing it correctly so that he can do it correctly, so he doesn't have to waste several meetings saying, hey, can this get on the agenda? Why isn't it on the agenda? And it'll just save a little bit of time and fairness. Thank you.
Okay. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing no other public comment. Any other discussion? Kylie, you want to poll a vote?
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor Berkowitz?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hemmingson?
No. Okay, so that fails. Roger, you want to go on with your report?
I have a question with regard to procedure, Council. 2-to-1 vote on this type of matter to place on the agenda. Do you need a quorum?
We have a quorum.
So there's a section in the government code that says that any action must be taken by a majority of the board. So technically it would fail. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to defer my report because I have found that these reports, which are usually at the very, very end of the meeting, are not heard by people. I'm going to give my report, and I've done a number of these this week, to our county clerk, Kylie, so anybody who's interested can get a copy of this and what I did for the week. But these reports have, I can only say, metastasized into attack sessions on one another. I don't find them productive at this time. So for the time being, I'm going to defer my report at this time and give it to the county clerk.
Okay. Procedurally, I think we're supposed to report out, but I suppose you can do whichever you like. That's what you appear to do. Okay, I'm going to move on to my report. Had a meeting with CDD staff and Fish and Wildlife about fishing access points, as well as Pacific Shores, and the progress that we're making there. As Bob mentioned, we had a homeless group put on by True North that met at the Episcopal Church. It was pretty enlightening, and we're moving forward with that. I was involved in a port meeting, which included the facilitators of the Whale Entanglement Group as well as the Indigenous Crab Task Force. I did a gender review. I met with Senator McGuire on homeless issues, the No Place Like Home. Also went to the McGuire Town Hall meeting. Also had a 2x2 with the Tolowa Dene Nation, taking their position on cannabis, being part of that working group, and they did give us a letter of what they would like to see within the ordinance. Also discussed their sewer hookups as well as some roads issues. And I had numerous constituent calls about street lamps. And that was about it for me. And if there's nothing further, we are adjourned.